Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So inshallah we'll continue with the next part of this class, and we stopped in the chapter of Tahara, which is to remove the impurities. We stopped at the part that talks about the leftovers, whatever is considered pure or impure. This part we finished. So the next part of this chapter talks about certain things that people may perceive as impure or unclean, but in reality, according to Sharia, they're not considered unclean. Which means that you are not obligated to wash them right away, because if there's najasa or impurity on your body or on your clothing or on your floor or anything that you come near, then you're supposed to clean it right away without delay if it is najis. But there are certain things that the Sharia does not obligate you to clean it right away. You might consider it unclean, that's up to you, that's fine. But do you have to clean it right away or wash it right away? That's a different story, okay? Because when I say things like al-mani, which is semen, some people say, oh, look at this Sharia, does not consider the semen unclean. No, the Sharia, the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, does not require us to immediately get up and wash it off our body or our clothing if it has come onto it. It doesn't require it. If this was najis, you would have to right away take that kind of measure. Do not leave the najasa on your clothing or on your body. You have to go and wash it. And definitely, if you're going to pray, you cannot go and pray with any kind of trace of that on your body if it was considered unclean according to the Sharia. So al-mani, which is the semen, we're not required to go and wash it off right away, but out of cleanliness it is recommended that you go and wash it, okay? But if you forgot and you had some trace on your body, and of course or on your clothing, for instance, especially on the clothing, because you're going to do ghusl anyhow if you had many on your body, right? But if you had semen on your body, you have to go and make ghusl, because where did the semen come from? So you have to go and wash, do the whole wash. It will come off your body, but you might have some on your clothing that you did not pay attention to. So that, and if you went and prayed, and you forgot some of it on your clothing, or even if you knew, then it is fine. It does not affect the validity of your prayer. And that we know from the fact that Sayyidah Aisha, or the wives of the Prophet in general, there's many ahadith on this matter. They used to scrape it off sometimes, just with their fingernail, or sometimes wash it off. Better to wash it off. But if this was najis, if it was najasa, it was something considered a defilement or uncleanliness or impurity, you can't just scrape it off, you have to wash it. Because scraping will not take it all away, especially what permeated into the clothing itself, right? So that is the evidence. And if you look at the hadith that indicate that some of the wives used to wash it, it doesn't mean that it is najis, because the other hadith indicate that he sometimes left it just to be scraped, okay? But it just shows it is recommended to wash it, okay? So that's one part. The second thing is al-khamr, which is alcohol. Again, the stronger opinion, although the majority of scholars consider the khamr as najis. You have to know that. In case somebody is following a madhab, he'll say, no, according to my madhab, it is najis, which means if you have the perfume with alcohol, you cannot spray it on your body or on your clothing, and you cannot pray in such clothing. You'll find most scholars saying it is najis, but where is the evidence? They'll bring you the ayah, إنما الخمر والميسر والأنصاب والأزلام رجس من عمل الشيطان فاجتنبوه لعلكم تفلحون. But we talked about this multiple times before. This verse from Surah Al-Ma'idah, it is verse 90 from Surah Al-Ma'idah, talks about multiple things: alcohol, gambling, what do you call it, idols, and drawing the lots, okay? All these are rijs, these are impurities. And then it says min amal shaitan, but it is what they call it najasa hukmiyya وليست najasa hissiyya. It is not material impurity, because the Sharia, the law of Allah, considers any evil act as an impurity, a spiritual impurity. So we have spiritual najasa hukmiyya, and we have the physical material impurity. This falls under the spiritual, okay, moral impurity. Why do we say that? How do you understand that from the verse? Can somebody tell me?
Because it creates an animosity between people and...
No, but why are we saying that this verse is talking about the spiritual and not material impurity? Why do we say that? Why? This verse talks about 4 things: alcohol, gambling, and drawing the lots, and idols.
It's associated with evil.
Yes, because none of the other things are considered physically impure in Sharia. The idols, if somebody touches an idol, it is not najis. If you draw the lots are not najis. If you draw these arrows to see, like gambling or to know your luck, these are not considered unclean in Sharia, okay? So why did they single out the alcohol from these 4 things? And gambling, he says, not maisir. Maisir is not even physical, okay? So why did they single out the alcohol from these 4 things and say, oh, the alcohol is najis? Then you have to consider all these things najis. But you can't, because one of them is not even a material thing. It is gambling. And maisir, it's the act of gambling. And the verse itself says, amal shaitan, talking about the act. Amal means function or act or deed, right? So here the verse is talking about deeds and actions, not talking about something physical, okay? And we have other evidences, which such as the fact that when the alcohol became prohibited, the Sahaba went and poured it in the streets and roads of Medina and the paths of Medina, which is haram to put something that's unclean or impure, najasa, in the road where the people walk. Okay, the hadith says that the streets and paths of Medina were running with alcohol, flowing. Alcohol was flowing, while it is not even allowed. If somebody wanted to urinate, to urinate in the path of the people, because then he makes najasa where people are walking, correct? And things like this. And then also because we cannot, the original state of everything is that it is pure. The exception is that something is impure or unclean. That's the exception. So we need evidence to transform something from impurity to from being pure to impure. So you cannot make such a claim that something is impure without firm, straightforward, evidence. Undisputable, clear evidence, of course. But here, you don't have any strong evidence to say that. You follow? Al-asl fil ashya' at-tahara. That's the original state, that everything is clean and pure. If somebody says otherwise, the burden of proof lies on him, not on the person who says it is pure. Okay? That makes it clear. And then other verses have the same kind of thing. إِنَّمَا الْمُشْرِكُونَ نَجَسٌ. The disbelievers are also impure, but they're not physically impure. Okay? Correct? Spiritual, because of the belief and the morals and the deeds that come out of them, and the beliefs that are within them are not in accordance to the right and upright beliefs and the truth that Allah accepts. Now, also rawth wa bawl ma yu'kal lahmu, which means the urine and the feces of those animals that you're allowed to eat. Those are clean, and the evidence behind that, they're considered clean. And again, you might be disgusted from these things, that is fine. And I said, when I say it is clean in Sharia, it doesn't mean that you go and put it on your body. It only means that you're not obligated to go and wash it off right away. And if it came on your clothing, you don't have to worry if you prayed. Especially if somebody works in dealing with such animals, what can he do, yani? Okay?
It's used to decorate homes.
Yeah, that's true. They used to not decorate, but also to make the To make the mud a bit stronger or something, or what?
Something like just common painting. I remember when I was very small, playing with my grandma. We used to, and it would be very pretty.
Painted with the feces of the animals?
Of like cow or whatever.
Feces or with the blood?
With feces.
Oh, okay.
Actually, it is used as a fuel to cook as well, like cow.
Yeah, it's used for so many. It's used as a fertilizer,
Yeah.
correct? It has many uses. He says it's used as also for lighting and fuel, right? And here for decoration. So cultural things, that's not a problem. If a culture considers something unclean, that's a cultural thing, and most people would not want to come near these things. Okay, that is fine, and it's not haram to think this way because that's how you are brought up. That's fine. But when we say it's not unclean, which means that you're just not obligated to wash it. It doesn't say that the Sharia has to, obligates you to accept such a thing. No, you don't have to. But the evidence behind that is that they used to use it as medicine. We talked about this last time. For diseases, especially Humma al-Medina, the fever of Medina, the treatment for that was to go and drink from the urine of camels that grew up in Medina. And we don't know the hikmah, the wisdom behind that, but maybe those camels have developed an immunity from being stung by those mosquitoes that bring those insects that disseminate this kind of disease. So maybe they developed antibodies, and when somebody drinks the urine, maybe those antibodies help prevent that disease or stop it, So, and that is what they used to do, and this is what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ indicated to some people who got sick when they got to Medina. There used to be something called Humma al-Medina, the fever of Medina, okay?
So do you think they should have tried it in MERS?
In what, sorry?
The treatment of MERS?
They've tried it in many other diseases, not only that. So they have, and as I mentioned to you, because people are disgusted nowadays to drink the urine of camels or cows or something like this, so they made it dry and put it in capsules. They have capsules of such remedies, and that's fine, but you don't have to use it.
Is it the same meaning when najas or najas, because I said rijs?
Rijs, yeah, rijs and najas is the same.
The same.
Yes. No. And also, so that's the urine part. So how do you know the feces is not najis? Because the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was asked, أنصلي في مرابد الغنم؟ قال نعم. He says, can we pray where the goats and sheep, for instance, stay, such as the places where they go and feed, or where the barn, for instance? He says, yes, you can. And of course, there'll be feces all over, dry or wet. There'll be feces in these areas. So that is allowed. And also, Prophet ﷺ himself, one time he made tawaf in Kaaba, around the Kaaba, and he was on his camel. And one time one of his wives was too tired, she couldn't make tawaf, and Salama, and he allowed her to make tawaf on the camel, okay? He did tawaf on the camel so that people see what he's doing and saying, so he's a little bit elevated, okay? To teach the people. And also he would give the khutbah during Hajj as well, while on the camel, so people can't see him. And we also know that the saliva is also clean from those animals. The Sahabi who was holding his camel, the saliva was coming on his shoulder as well. So that is all evidence that both the urine and the feces, because that camel, you can't prevent him from defecating while making tawaf. And this is Masjid al-Haram, correct? This is sacred mosque. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ would not allow something like this if it wasn't. Now, although we know the feces and the urine of those animals that we're allowed to eat, such as what kind of animal? Goats, sheep, cows, camels, right? Is clean. We're not allowed to pray in an area where camels stay, called ma'atin al-ibil. Not because the feces is unclean, but there's a different reason behind that. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was asked about this. أنصلي في معاطن الإبل قال أصلي في مبارك الإبل قال لا. He says, can I pray where camels stay? Those grounds where the camels stay or spend the night or feed? So he said no. But when he was asked, he says, فإنها خلقت من شياطين. Okay, this is something from the ghaib. We don't know. He says it is linked to somehow, or خلقت من شياطين. It is linked somehow with the jinn and shayateen. We don't know how, but this is the case, and it's something from the ghaib. So yes, but that doesn't make the feces unclean, because we know from other pieces of evidence that the feces and urine of those animals is clean. Then the fourth item is the blood, siwa dam al-hayd wal nifas, and that's a big controversy again. Blood except the blood that comes out from the woman during menstruation and postpartum blood. Those are the two kinds of blood that are considered as najis. Beyond that, we talked about this before, but the majority of the scholars, and almost a consensus, consider the blood of human beings as najis. But again, there's no evidence to prove that, and actually the evidence goes against that, okay? But traditionally, this is how Muslim scholars thought about it, in case somebody asks you. But we know that the Sahaba used to get injured in their battles, and they used to continue praying while the blood is flowing. And even those who said that it is najis, then they say, but if it's a little bit, it's allowed, and okay. So where do you get this distinction from? Where do you get the distinction from? And also the people who said the blood of the animals that we're allowed to eat, they said even the blood that flows out of the animals we're allowed to eat is najis, but the blood that stays in the meat after you slaughter it, that is not najis. Again, where is the evidence behind that? But that's how most Muslim scholars have considered this matter. And then I even asked recently a scholar about this. I said to him, the feces and urine of that animal we're allowed to eat is not considered najis. But then you're telling me the blood is najis. And then he used the ayah, of course, قل لا أجد فيما أوحي إلي محرما على طاعم يطعمه إلا أن يكون ميتة أو دما مسفوحا أو لحم خنزير فإنه رجس. He mentioned the ayah, but what does the ayah talk about again here? What you're not allowed? What is haram to consume? What is haram to consume and eat? Not that it is najasa. لا أجد فيما أوحي إلي. I don't find within what is revealed to me something that is forbidden to eat. على طاعم يطعمه إلا أن يكون ميتة, a dead animal. أو لحم خنزير أو دم مسفوحا, or this gushing blood, أو لحم خنزير, or the meat of the swine. فإنه رجس, because it is unclean. Again, they consider this word unclean that it is najasa. Okay, although the ayah was originally talking about what you're not allowed to eat. Okay, but just something to mention. But definitely the blood of menstruation and postpartum blood, that is najis. And then scholars said any blood that comes out from as-sabilain, whether the urethra, the vagina, or rectally, those kinds of bloods are all they join them with the blood of menstruation, and that we can understand. That's close enough. But then the other bloods, how can you consider? There's a hadith, Sahan ibn Mas'ud. Ibn Mas'ud, one time he slaughtered an animal, and a camel, and then the blood of the animal and the feces was on him, and then the salah, the iqamah came, and he went and prayed, فَصَلَّى وَلَمْ يَتَوَضَّأ, and he didn't even make wudu or anything. He prayed with all this on his clothing. I just wanted to mention that to you. Also Umar al-Khattab prayed while blood was gushing out. Another Sahabi was hit with arrows, and he was on the watch for the Sahaba and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and the arrows hit him. Ghazwat Dhat al-Riqa, Sahabi al-Ansari, I don't recall his name, but he was hit with 3 arrows, and still he continued to pray. Then number 5, رطوبة فرج المرأة, which is the secretion that comes out from the vagina of the woman, that is not considered unclean. There's no evidence to consider it unclean. Okay, so that's important. And then al-qay', the vomitus. Again, it is unclean to us as human beings. We just want to wash it off, but if a trace is on the clothing, it does not make it najis. Okay, and al-araq, araq al-junub wal-ha'id, the sweat that comes from somebody who has this major defilement through having sexual intercourse, or a woman who's menstruating, again, it is clean. And Sahabi Abu Huraira, one time he was in a state of janaba, which means he had either a wet dream or something, And then he tried to stay away from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ until he goes and washes. And then when the Prophet ﷺ asked him, why did I not see you for some time? He says, I was in a state of janaba, I didn't want to be close to you. He says to him, Subhanallah, in the Muslim la yanjus. He says the Muslim is always pure, is never unclean. Okay? And then finally, the insects that don't have blood, like if you, such as a fly or an ant or a spider, if they die, for instance, in water, if they fall into water and they die, or into a cup, again, it doesn't make that ritually unclean. Okay, it does not make it ritually unclean. Stop here, inshallah. How many minutes did we go? 40? What do you mean? How many minutes?
But it's